Right? This is the normal one used in the disability community. You favor species typical, and then the ones who are subspecies typical are the defective products. Right? Because if you can't walk, you're not species typical, and so therefore, right? But it's much broader. Nearly every ism out there very likely has at the core some ableism judgment. Sexism, we know women are irrational, and that's why they weren't allowed to vote for the longest part. And in many countries, people use arguments about women not as able as men to oppress women. Casteism is the same thing. Being in certain caste is linked to certain abilities, which is intrinsic to belonging to the caste. Ageism, of course, because you're not use anymore, you're obsolete, and you, right? I mean, in earlier times, at least you had some wisdom, but now we have Googles, right? So you don't need the wisdom anymore, right? Racism, I mean, James Watson lost his job because he's saying certain groups are simply cognitive more able than others, and the others will never be able to catch up, right? Anti-environmentalism was mostly, well, we can do to the environment whatever we want because we are simply superior, right? We can control it. Speciesism, well, we are cognitive able, the animals aren't, so we can eat them. Consumerism, that led to the crisis you had in the moment. You had to have the ability to buy whatever, a house, whatever, like the ability to consume. GDP, the ability to be productive. Right? These are all abilities we choose, or certain groups choose as being essential, and use them for certain other areas. The MBIC report, which was for performance enhancement, uses productivity over 60 times, efficiency 54, and competitiveness 29 times. That's why they were able to sell nanotech and nanoscale sciences to the hill, because to keep the US #1. Right? Lisbon was, in essence, where the European community defined who they are. And you see again, to become the most competitive. Okay, now Europe wants to be #1. US wants to be #1, well, they still think they're #1. Right? Then and on TV shows recently, like India feels they're #2, want to be #1. China wants to be #1. So you have quite a good competition going on of being #1. And that leads to certain problems. Right? Nature just had a survey out from the readers, and you can see 79% feel that healthy people should be allowed to take cognitive enhancers. Right? And 1/3 even feel peer pressure that they have to give it to their kids because of all the things going on. Right? And then they're coming up with the norm. The AAAS, American Association for Advancement of Sciences, had a lot of meetings on performance enhancement, and they say, well, on the one hand, you can't make a distinction between therapeutic and enhancement because it's all just blurring together. And indeed, most of what I showed were actually therapeutics, right? The subvocal speech, I mean, this is all for disabled people. So you use us as a therapeutic, and then you make it an enhancement for the so-called normal people, and then, of course, the ones who are supposed to get this will never get this because they don't have the money to pay for it, but that's a different story, right? But then they say, because about economic competition and consumer demands will push it to, it's again about you. It's not about me, it's not about the politics, it's about you because you're the consumers, right? It's your fault, right? Global competitiveness, brain drain, national security and quality of life, consumer lifestyles. This is what drives performance enhancement. And as long as you don't deal with these drivers, you can come up with all kinds of philosophical questions against enhancement as you want. If you don't deal with why people want it and the social structure around it, you have a problem. Right? So this is what ableism did so far. Right? We favor species typical, and that was driving the health and rehab field. Right? Because you need something really species typical, and then you define something as subspecies typical, and then you can fix them. That's where the money is, right? And that's why we medicalize people more and more. By now, like 75% of Americans are officially diseased, right? So in essence, it becomes a totally obsolete term, even without the enhancement stuff, because everyone is seen as having some defect. In Canada, it's like 60% of people above age 12 have at least one permanent, like one chronic disease, right? So if you're going this, I mean, it becomes kind of obsolete to really think in this species typical if everyone is, I mean, in essence, diseased. But you're going further, right? With all this enhancement, where like you move ableism, and it drives the rehab field, the future that you really want beyond species typical abilities. Because there's no reason why it should stop at this normative if you have all this other stuff which can move beyond, right? With the competitiveness and so on, you very likely will move the desire towards beyond species typical as a new way of staying competitive, staying ahead of the others, and so on. And that will, of course, lead to the new, what I call the techno-poor, the unenhanced, impaired, and disabled, the ones who don't want, which are called refuseniks, right? And the ones right, who can't afford it, which is mostly 95% of the global population for the time being, right? So health in the future will, normally it's still you're born healthy and you're getting somehow ill. The future will be you are born ill and you only are healthy if you get your newest upgrade, right? Of course, that's where the money is, right? It's like with software. You buy one, you have to constantly upgrade yourself, right? Rehab, the normal definition was, right, after you had the so-called accident or whatever, and then you're getting to as normal a condition as possible that will be thrown out of the window to an optimum a condition as possible. Because if you're a rehab practitioner like occupational therapist and you're getting legs and right, and the person like an amputee wants to have legs, I don't think you can tell them, well, you you can only have the legs Gregor had like this 20 years ago, when you have the Pistorius legs, right, as an option. Right? And very likely, very soon, you will give to the so-called amputees legs which outdo then, in essence, in their capabilities, the legs of the therapist. Right? And that's not how the world is supposed to be. Right? The therapist is still supposed to reign superior to their clients. That the clients outdo then the therapist, that of course puts immense pressure on the client, on the therapist to outdo again eventually the client. Will lead to a huge identity crisis in the rehab field. Right? And that's actually my main field I'm working on mostly nowadays. So what do you do? Right? The normal arguments against enhancement people have to work, so you have to do something else. And I think really you have to do a whole new field. You really have to look more at ableism and favoritism, right, for ability, and have an ethics around it. Look at frameworks of standards and values that guide in the beliefs. You have really to look into how do we decide why is competitiveness and why do we all agree that and don't fight the competitiveness as the underlying, right, I mean, organizer of our social structure and our worthiness towards each other's. Right? So you need to guide the favoritism for certain abilities, and how one decides which will do favors over others. You have to guide the reaction towards humans and others, biological entities that are seen, real or perceived, to lack these essential abilities. You have to include the study and generation of those standards and values, the impact assessment of different forms of ableism onto different ethics theories, and so on. And you have to identify ethical actions that flow from a favoritism for certain abilities. And then you have to look at ableism and favoritism for ability studies, which is really to look at the abilities. It's not about this, it's not equal disability study, which looks mostly at, or should be, at the social consequences of not having certain abilities. But you have to look at how do we decide which abilities are essential. Why is it that we mostly run after a competition and empathy is out? Right? Why do we make certain choices as a social structure, and which choices are sustainable? Right, and in which way? And then, of course, ableism foresight to look at, okay, what kind of abilities come down the pipeline which change simply the way we think and deal with each other? And then how do we govern the whole area? Without this, most science technology governments, you're very much limited. And we see this in our discourses around science technology because most of the discourses on governance is about safety issues. They're really not about social structure impact because we are still underlying the accept the competitiveness and so on. And if we do this, you don't have much to govern on the social structure side. That's why most of the discourses are around, I mean, food security or all of it, mostly safety issues, but not really social issues. I mean, you can just go to, like Barry Bond, right, was doping, and the owner of the team didn't lose one spectator because you guys all showed up and watched him. Right? It's really the spectators. If you don't show up, then as the doping well, like it would stop because they would lose their livelihood. But of course, you like this, right? To see and the same as the Tour de France. I mean, every year, the first 20 who win are doped and getting thrown out, and next year the TV teams are still there, right? So it's really not just about the sports athlete who dopes. It's really about the people who still watch that, knowing that it's doping, right? So it's much your, responsibility to deal with the issues than just some athlete, and that's really what it is.